Hello, and welcome to the Working Tools Masonic Podcast. Today we'll be discussing dues in Masonic lodges.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our opinions and thoughts are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions, either here on YouTube or on our Facebook page. We'd also appreciate a thumbs up and especially any comments on our videos.
Thank you for coming to see us today. I'm Matt Appel at the Grand Lodge of Washington, and I have with me Brother David Colbeth, also the Grand Lodge of Washington, Brother Connor Massey of the Grand Lodge of British Columbia in the Yukon, and our esteemed Brother Stephen Chung, also of the Grand Lodge of British Columbia in the Yukon. Thanks for coming out today, guys.
Don't say all that too often. They'll go straight to his head.
Oh, yeah. Right. You know, it's that elevation to being the Grand Lodge of British Columbia, right?
No. It was the esteemed bit. Your head's already too big. We don't want it to swell anymore.
Right. Yeah, I know. Then there won't be any room left on the screen.
At least I get my name tonight.
Yeah.
Everybody got your name.
David Chung.
You're a person again.
Yes.
So today we're going to be discussing dues in our Masonic lodges, and I guess the first question is, I'm a big picture kind of guy, so I want to ask the big picture question. What are the dues for? Why do we pay dues? Why do lodges charge dues? What's the point?
Well,
It was interesting to me when I was researching it. Mackey's talks about that in the beginning, back in the 1700s when GGLE was formed, there was no purpose for dues. Guys would come together, they have a lodge meeting, and they disperse, and there wasn't any reason for dues. I hadn't even thought about that. We used to get together before there was lodges and form buildings and bills to pay and taxes to pay and electricity and all that. They just met in the bar and had some.
Heck, if anything, back when we were operatives, like the people got paid, right? It was the opposite of dues.
Yeah, well, once we started putting structure to it and having buildings and taxes and things like that to deal with, well, then there became a cost to surviving. And that's really what implemented dues. And then, of course, once there was a system for, collecting dues, well, the Grand Lodge, well, they got onto that pretty quick. And now you pay Grand Lodge assessments, too, on top of it.
But a part of the Grand Lodge, a part of the money that Grand Lodge takes goes towards NBC, the Cancer Car program.
Correct.
Released on Vancouver Island, which is a charity that our Grand Lodge facilitates. I don't know does Washington take a per capita that goes to a charity that the Grand Lodge runs, or
We have we have our per capita currently from the Grand Lodge is $28, of which actually I guess this year it'll be 34, but of which $3 is directed towards each $1 towards each of the youth groups. So every Mason in Washington gives $1 towards DMLA, Rainbow, and Job's Daughters.
Can BC Yukon do that? Can we call Douglas Franklin and ask?
Well, I'm pretty sure you could put a bug in somebody's ear. But as we'll find out tonight talking about dues, I don't know how much success you'll have your first go around in trying to get Grand Lodge to do that on a Grand Lodge level, because everybody's already up in arms about raising of dues. And this year our Grand Lodge proposed an $8 increase per capita, and the membership changed that from $8 to $10 in the meeting, and made an amendment to the motion to increase it by $2, so that the charities that would have got struck out of getting funding because of the lack of money, they said, no, we want to support that too. So they put the $2 back in that, so to give that extra to these other charities and keep supporting them. So
but yeah, at the end of the day, that $2, like, that's what, a cup of coffee from Tim Hortons?
yeah, and now we'll talk about dues, okay? Because
actually, I was going to say exactly that. So I agree, Grand Lodge per capita is an important conversation, but beyond addressing the fact that our dues to our lodge have to pay for that Grand Lodge per capita, I do sort of feel like that's a whole separate topic that we should discuss, and I think it's really important. But it's not what we're talking about today.
Right.
So just to put a bow on it, though, what is the per capita up in BC and Yukon?
Oh, I don't remember off the top of my head. Do you remember, Steve?
I think it's like $80-something now, $86 or something.
All right, and ours just went to 1 year. For 1 year, it's going to be $34, and it went up from 28 to 34.
Yeah, $6 assessment increase.
Right, but for a one-shot deal.
One time.
But anyway, aside from paying the per capita, which again I think is an important topic that we should discuss at another meeting or another podcast rather. So what else do we cover? Do you guys, for instance, do your dues specifically cover charity? Do you have a charity portion that is set aside from your dues?
Well, I don't know what happens in all the lodges that Connor belongs to, but at Prince Charles Lodge, we have a bursary fund where we support education for any Mason or relative thereof, or somebody who knows a Mason that is trying to get an education and could use a little assistance. So we do that on an annual basis. The funds that we have put aside generate interest, which we take that interest and give that away to these youth that are looking for. And it's not necessarily even youth. Some of the guys' wives go back to school and are taking upgrading and things like that. And we support that. The Grand Lodge of British Columbia and Yukon has a lot of bursaries that they give out, but it seems to me that when I look through the list, the majority of them, if not all of them, require you to be a 4-year program and full-time, and so a lot of our people that we are supporting couldn't even apply for those because they're not four-year program people, right? But our dues in our lodge are last year were $150. Okay, that covers the operational costs of our lodge. That fits our budget. Whatever our budget is dictates our dues. We've lost some members to Grand Lodge above, and every time that happens, that means that our dues got to go up per person simply to cover those costs. And it makes it really difficult sometimes when, like last year, we knew that they needed to really be raised, $10, $15, but we felt the resistance in general discussion about it. And so they proposed only a $5 dues increase. That budget got defeated and we were operating without a budget because they couldn't pass the dues part of it. And, like for $5, I mean, come on, most guys will spend that, like you say, going out for coffee, right? And really, when you think about the value of lodge, I mean, we can get into that in the broader aspect of this in a little bit, but the value we get out of going to the lodge for the nominal fees that we're paying, I mean, in my humble opinion, I think our lodge dues should go up to $200 a year and include the meals and have meals beforehand or something along that lines. We have meals after, and our stewards bring food for after. But really, come on, the guys, it's 10 o'clock anyways. I could change that. That's a whole different thing. But our dues have to support our lodge functions. And this year, they're going to be forced to go up $10 by the Grand Lodge assessment. And last year, when we tried to raise that, I had one guy say, I pay $1,000 in dues up and down the valley here, right? I pay $1,000 in lodge dues every year, and I can't afford another $5 increase. Well, in my humble opinion, then maybe you should not be paying dues to multiple lodges. There's a lodge in our district that is supported by past masters that just join the lodge because it's a fun lodge and to keep it alive. They need membership, right? So they go and pay dues at another lodge to help that lodge out, and yet now they complain about paying too much in dues. So catch-22, right?
See, I can understand that point of view to an extent. I pay probably around $700 a year in dues, but I'm getting absolute benefit from everything. Like Henderson Lodge, my mother lodge, I think we pay about $240 a year.
But those numbers you're talking about multiple lodges. That's not a single lodge.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I do know of a lodge here in Victoria where their dues are $500 a year.
So, Steve, when you talk about $120, $105 a year for dues, does that include your Grand Lodge assessment, or is that separate?
In our lodge, it includes the Grand Lodge assessment.
And your Grand Lodge assessment was $80, you said, right?
Yeah.
So you're really only paying $40 for dues.
Well, no, we're 150, so we're paying 75. Last year, I think it was $70-something for Grand Lodge assessment. This year, it's going to be $80-something. Okay. Right? But we were paying about, I think it was $78 for our lodge's portion of our dues. Now, I did some inquiring on this. Well, actually, I didn't really do any inquiring on it, to be honest with you. What happened was, I'm an active guy, and I go to most lodges in my district. And so I happen to be there when they talk about their budgets and they talk about raising dues. Some of our lodges pay $175 in dues and then the Grand Lodge assessment, right? But it's all.
I think that's what we're trying to get to is what is the lodge dues actually, and not the assessments. The assessments. It's interesting to know whether the lodge includes that or pay. There's actually a couple of lodges in my district that pay all of that they pay the Grand Lodge assessment, and they don't charge the member for dues, even though you can look at it if they pay dues and then it's less. Like there's one lodge that is the dues are only $25, and the lodge pays the Grand Lodge assessment, so they're going backwards every year.
I just grabbed my lodge summons here, and it says here that our dues are $200 for all members, plus the Grand Lodge assessment and cancer card program levy.
Plus.
That's $280.
So yeah.
And that's for which lodge? Henderson Lodge?
Henderson Lodge.
So your blue lodge.
Yeah. Well, one of my blue lodges.
Yeah.
So it seems like we're talking for I hesitate to say this, but your average, your median BCNY lodge, we're talking about on somewhere in the neighborhood of $150, $200 for what they collect from their members.
Yeah, and then at Asher Lodge, which is my secondary lodge, it's $100 plus your Grand Lodge assessment, because I only pay $100 there, and I'm an affiliate member.
Right, and so in our jurisdiction, if you pay your Grand Lodge assessment at one lodge, you don't pay it when in your multiple memberships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do the opposite. We charge it each lodge you're a member of, except for one or two. But yeah.
And then some of the education research lodges I'm a member of are like $30 a year.
And technically, it's not the member that pays it, right? So we don't. When you talk about your summons, you grab your summons. On ours, it's just the lodge dues, but then they put on there the Grand Lodge assessment. But technically, it's the lodge that is assessed and not the member that's assessed. At least in Washington, it's the member that's assessed, not. I'm sorry, the lodge is assessed, not the member. But they're, like Matt just said, you're assessed every. If you're a member of 5 lodges, those lodges have you on the rolls 5 times, and so the lodges get charged 5 times.
No, see.
It's actually really interesting when you apply for affiliation here in BC Yukon. On the form, it says, "I hereby designate Henderson Lodge number 84 to be my Grand Lodge assessment paying lodge."
There's been a lot of talk about that belly button assessments.
Yeah. Well,
so it's, I'll say in my district here that I have experience with, we have one lodge that has was it $45 a year, sort of like David was saying. I think they go backwards every year with their dues. We've got one lodge that has they actually index theirs to the Grand Lodge assessment. So when the per capita changes, their dues are 4 times the Grand Lodge per capita. So when the per capita changes, their dues automatically change. Oh. And there's another lodge actually just last week that changed theirs. Instead of, they were changing we're charging a set amount, and they just changed it to 8 hours of minimum wage in Washington State. So as the Washington State minimum wage changes, their dues will change every year.
See, I think that brings up an interesting topic is I know that if a brother is in poor, destitute, and distressed circumstances, he can ask lodges to remit his dues. But it would be really cool if some lodges, and I'm curious on your opinion, Steve, if some lodges in BC Yukon were to do that sort of thing where it's not, all right, $200 plus Grand Lodge mumbo jumbo, but it's like, we're going to calculate what 8 hours of minimum wage would be. So that would be like, let me just grab my calculator here.
Like $12 in Canada, isn't it? So
yeah, something like that. So that would be $96. I can't math. That would be $96 a year.
Yeah, we have one lodge in our district. There's 9 lodges, and one of them has that exact same calculation. There's only one that has an index, and I wanted to go to an index. And when 6 years ago or 5 years ago, when we changed our bylaws, I wanted to do that, and they said we could. And then 2 years later, now all of a sudden lodges can magically index. So there's some lodges that are talking about doing like 10 times minimum wage down here, which I think is what I'd like to move our lodge to, is 10 times minimum wage.
That's really interesting. I don't understand why they do it by a minimum wage or by whatever the Grand Lodge assessment is, because really that does put into question what your dues are for, right? Being that our dues are determined by our budget and our membership numbers, right? That's really it. This is the budget to run the lodge, divided up by the members. That's what the dues become, right? That to us was the only true way to make it the cost of operations versus some random calculation. So I don't understand why you guys do the calculations that way.
For ours, our dues are have to be set in our bylaws. So every time, if you want to change your dues because your expenses go up, you'd have to go through a bylaws change, which it's not the hardest thing in the world to do or anything, but it's kind of a pain.
I'm concerned.
I think this was a mechanism for them to say, hey, we're going to set our dues here, and this way it'll be indexed more or less to inflation. So every 3 or 5 years, we don't have to say, oh, wait, inflation went up. We need to afford stuff, so we're going to raise our dues again.
Yeah, so we fixed that problem by putting we reworded our bylaws to state that our dues would be
divided equally by the membership.
The cost of operations divided equally by membership, and that was to be a budget done every year in October, and we have to pass the budget.
Yeah, I'm not on the bylaws committee, but I'm guessing no lodge in Washington does it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they probably don't, but it's probably an interesting exercise because I'll bet a lot of lodges don't have budgets, actual budgets.
Yes. Distressingly, I'm pretty sure you're correct.
And when you run without a budget, that means you have to pass every little thing in a lodge meeting, and it really makes for some long meetings.
Or at least you should.
Well, according to the Robert's Rules of Order, which don't really apply in lodge.
There's another good topic for another conversation.
Yeah. You would, according to the structure, you would have to do it that way.
I have a copy of Robert's Rule of Order just behind me, actually.
That's if you were a good DMLA and you were taught to follow the book.
Yeah.
Right?
So I think some of the lodges, like the ones at $25, the reason they're $25 in our case is because they sold their building several years ago, so they're sitting on a big honeypot, and they're just slowly. Well, some of them are living off the interest. Actually, there was one lodge not in my district that changed their dues recently. They were have a multi-million-dollar endowment. I'm sure Matt knows or may know what I'm talking about. And isn't their monthly budget like $20,000 a year or $20,000 a month, Matt? If you remember, I think it's.
I really don't know. I'm not sure.
It's some kind of crazy amount every 20,000. They have to spend just a lot of money every year, just the interest they earn, and so they wanted to raise their dues to encourage attendance, and so they created a thing called Lodge Bucks. I won't name the lodge. They could think the Lodge Bucks, and so their dues went from like $40 a year to $240 a year. But if you attend a meeting, you get 20 Lodge Bucks, and if you go to an event, you get 20 Lodge Bucks, and those can go to pay your dues,
and
so then you don't have to pay it.
That's an interesting topic, and I'm not going to name the lodge, but there's a lodge that I know of in Vancouver Island that the Worshipful Master has been talking about. If you go to lodge a certain amount of times a year, then your dues are like $30 or $40 cheaper than if you were to just show up once.
Isn't there? I thought there was one up there that was $1,200 a year.
Well, I've never heard of that.
The most expensive lodge that I've heard of a year is $500.
$500, okay. I was thinking, I've been floating to the idea to people that'll listen to me, which I've got an audience now. So
3 at least.
What if our dues, at least in Washington, what if our dues for every Mason was $1,200 a year, $100 a month, and that included, as Stephen said, catered dinner every month, a really great catered dinner, and also included your Grand Lodge assessment, whatever that is. So the Grand Lodge, in our case, are only getting $30 a year, basically. What if they got 50 or 100 or $50, and then 100 of it would go to the Grand Lodge charity, which in our case is Washington Masonic Charities, and then you also automatically we have a thing every year called the Lodge Leadership Retreat. What if that automatically gave you an attendance to your Lodge Leadership Retreat, as well as another regional training event where you could go and spend a night?
Would this include your hotel room and ticket to Grand Lodge?
Yeah. Our entrance to Grand Lodge is $20.
Our entrance to Grand Lodge here in BC is free, but getting the meals and the hotel room was expensive.
Yeah, I don't know if you could do 2 big events like that, but you could certainly do a big event like our Lodge Leadership Retreat is 3 days or 2.5 days.
See, like I understand what you're trying to say, but from my point of view as a 22-year-old, and this can come across as a bit hypocritical because I've just said that I pay several $100s a year in dues, but I'm also a member of like 10 organizations. But if one lodge costed me $1,200 a year, I honestly don't know if I could afford to be a Freemason.
Well, here's the adultness coming out. Maybe do you need to belong to 12 organizations? You know, why are we
right? But even if I was only a member of one lodge, like the amount of organizations that I'm a member of right now is about as much as I can afford, and that's about $700 a year, probably less, closer to $600.
Yeah.
But if just being a member of Henderson Lodge, or for the purposes of this conversation, just being a member of the Working Tools Lodge number 1,
sure,
meant that I had to pay $1,200 a year, I couldn't do it.
So that brings me to an interesting question because we hear that a lot. How to phrase this? When my lodge raised dues, both times, one time when I was master and one subsequent time, the comment always was, it was always the old guys saying, the young guys won't join the lodge if it costs more than X number of dollars a year.
And that's true.
And it's true, but I wonder where that line is. So at the time, when I was master and we raised dues were $55 a year, and I raised them to $80. I really wanted $120, but I was told that wasn't going to fly. So we went to $80 a year. And I found it had been 55 for as long as, for many years before that. And I found myself wondering, where is that line? At what point do you start to lose members? Is a 5% increase okay? Is a 100% increase okay? Where's the line there?
In my opinion, I don't think it comes down to percentages. I think it comes down to, I think it does literally come down to a line. Like, Henderson Lodge could Henderson Lodge, if they doubled their dues, I would probably have an issue paying for it. But Asher Lodge, if they doubled their dues, I'd groan about it. I'd go up to the worshipful master and complain a little bit, but I'd still pay it, because the difference there is if Asher Lodge doubled their dues, that would only be $200 a year. If Henderson Lodge doubled their dues, that would be almost $600, because we pay 200 and something a year, right? 250 a year.
Right.
So, in my point of view, from my point of view, it doesn't come down to how much percentage-wise the dues increase. It comes down to what the overall dues are. Like going back to Working Tools Lodge number 1, $1,200 a year. You know, I'm crazy enough about Freemasonry that I would probably make it work, but I would probably have to get rid of other things in my life in order to make it happen. I would have to, you know, maybe not go to Grand Lodge or not go and see my mom at Christmas, who lives in Ontario.
But again, if those ancillary things of Masonry were included in your dues, then it could make it more overall affordable. But
even like the non-ancillary things, if I had to pay $1,200 a year just to be a member of one lodge, I wouldn't be a member of any concordant bodies. I couldn't afford it. I wouldn't be a member of more than one lodge. I couldn't afford it. I probably couldn't afford to visit as much, because I'll drive for 3 hours to go and visit a lodge, which costs me maybe $100 in gas. Right?
Would you agree, though, that the people that are very serious about membership would be at those meetings and be part of those organizations?
I don't know, though, because I do think that lodges at that level of dues would seriously lose membership. Like I think most of you would say that I'm probably one of the most enthusiastic Freemasons. At least Steve has said that I'm the most enthusiastic Freemason that he's met in BC, and that would stop me from going to lodge. It
would stop you from being a member. It shouldn't stop you from attending.
It would stop me from being a member, but like, you need to be a member of a lodge to visit lodges.
But you could be a member of one. I think that's a lot of sometimes the problem is that people are members of 10 lodges. And
right, but what I'm saying is if that one lodge...
Sometimes they're an officer in 5 of them, and they might be blocking a new man that's wanting to become an officer or to be a member, but, you know...
Right, I understand that, but if that one lodge, if in order to visit, you have to be a member of one lodge, but say that one lodge costed me $1,200 a year, yeah. it wouldn't work.
Okay,
I couldn't afford it.
I do see the definite problem for a lot of the membership couldn't afford it. The simple economics, I'm going to estimate probably 20% of the Masons in BC probably would say, I just can't afford that, right? You know, because simple economics, they don't have the jobs here. You know, BC stands for bring cash, right? So it's not a cheap province to live in, right? So I can see that. However, I also know that because, you know, when you go to join, like when I went to join Scottish Rite, there was another $450 initiation fee, right? And it was like, okay, well, that's a chunk, right? Now, it did include my ring and, you know, certificates and things like that. But, you know, the ring was a big chunk of it, right? So I kind of saw that there was another value there, which was the ring. So I justified it. Now, for me, if I was going to join another lodge, now if I knew that David and Matt were going within an hour of me somewhere here, and they were going to a lodge once a month, and they were having a catered meal, a good old time banquet before dinner or before their meeting, then having their meeting and a bit of a social and gone home. And I can see those lodges gaining in membership. I don't know about the $1,200, maybe more like, you know, 5 or 6, right? Would be more attainable. I mean, you would definitely, I could start another lodge in this valley doing that, because if just for me to go to the installations for the 8 lodges in my district, there's $200 in dinners on the cheap, right? that's based on $25 a banquet, and that's a cheap banquet nowadays. 30 and 35.
What could work would be that if you want to keep using that $1,200 figure, is that could be your initiation fee.
And so I think we're dancing around something here, which I think is important, which is the value that you get for that money.
Right.
If you're paying $25 a year and all I want is a dues card so I can tell somebody I'm a Mason and I can wear a ring, then that's one thing. But if you are getting value out of going to those meetings and you are becoming a better person by learning about yourself at these meetings, and you are expanding your horizons, and the world is a better place because you are participating in this, then you are willing to, I mean, again, $1,200 might be an extreme example, but you are willing to pay more than $25 a year for that experience, I would think. Well, and I know I am. If I were getting that in my lodge, I'd be willing to pay way more than our current dues.
It's no different, Connor, when Connor went to join Asler Lodge. Asler Lodge is an educational thing, right? It's an extra. Personally, I think they've undercharged for it because the value proposition with Asler Lodge is worth far more than what they're charging in dues, in my opinion. I'm just not the scholar, so I don't join it because, I don't read. I don't have time to sit down and read a book. I used to have time in the mornings to do that. Now I have to go through my emails. I have to do other things because life's just too busy. I have too many commitments. I have to run the calendar for Grand Lodge, and so that keeps me. I got to keep doing more work, so I don't have time to read. So maybe one day I'll join Asher Lodge, but again, there's no value for me there because that's not my thing. So I see exactly what you're saying, Matt, with respect to perceived value. If you're getting the value that you're looking for out of that particular lodge, I think you'd pay whatever that lodge is charging for dues. Yeah, otherwise you're not going to go. It's real simple.
And what could work is, say you wanted to have Working Tools Lodge number 1 be $1,200 a year. That's the baseline, right? So Matt and Dave, you guys are wonderfully wealthy. You can afford that. We're not saying you actually are. I'm just using you as examples. All right, you guys are wonderfully wealthy. You can pay it, right? Steve, you're kind of wealthy. You've got a newborn set of twins that's taking up some of your expendable cash. You're growing a new company. You can make it work, but $1,200 is about as much as you can cover, right? And then me, I'm a college kid. I'm spending all of my money going to school. All right. So instead of saying all 4 of us have to pay $1,200, Matt and Dave, because they're super rich, pay $2,000 a year. Steve, you pay $12,000 or $1,200 a year, and me, being the poor starving student, would pay like $500 a year. Where at the end of the day, it all works out, and it comes down to what a brother is willing, able, and capable of paying. How would that take away from the lodge ability to function? I don't think it would, because it would all balance out. And it shows that a brother is willing to pay, not because it would help the brother who would be unable to pay, whereas the brothers who can pay more are able to help in that sort. And I'm kind of rambling at this point, but do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I totally understand. I would say a couple things. If I could make the new Working Tools Podcast Lodge number 1, I would probably vote that we do exactly what Stephen was talking about. I'm pointing to his box. But exactly what Stephen was talking about. And your budget's $12,000 a year, and you got 120 members. Everybody pays $100, and so that would be the first thing I would say. And then the second thing is I would say it probably actually needs to be $150 a year, because I don't know about your lodges, but our lodge has a little bit of funds. But I was baffled that every lodge doesn't have $1 million war chest, and they've been in business for 100 years.
Yeah, I know, right?
So we were talking about earlier why do we need extra money? And I really think it's honestly to build the war chest, so to speak, so that you can give $50,000 a year in scholarships to the high school instead of $500 a year, or you can.
So thank you for joining us on the Working Tools podcast for part 1 of our discussion about lodge dues. We will be joining you soon next week with our part 2 of our discussion. So on behalf of Connor, Stephen, David, and myself, thank you very much for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye.